All right, so last week we were talking about suffering, and we're going to go a little bit more intense and a little bit more in depth, putting together about 15 different concepts and ideas from a bunch of a variety of sources, both spiritual and scientific. Using this drawing, some poetry and some classical music or contemporary music, and eventually get to the point why it is that we suffer and what is suffering for and why we're supposed to embrace it, because there's some crazy lines in the Bible, verses about stuff like rejoicing in our suffering. Well, what the heck? Rejoice when we suffer? Well, we're going to talk about exactly why that is and exactly why we want to embrace that. I'm going to first start with the idea that we've talked about before of the fMRI, the science of the brain and what's happening in our brains. And up there, scientists have found that we have basically the brain is like a computer in many different ways, because there's patterns and there's like data and stuff like that up there. And all of us have very similar brains because they've found these specific things in the brain. They found, first of all, the idea of a hammer is in your brain. And if I'm thinking of a hammer and you're thinking of a hammer, the same part of our brain lights up. And they can identify that you're thinking of a hammer because where you think of a hammer is where I think of a hammer. And they're like, well, that part of the brain's lighting up, therefore they're thinking of a hammer. And they've also done that with things like igloos, right? Now that he just said igloo, the exact same part in your brain lit up. That is if you know what an igloo is. They've also found something called the Jennifer Aniston neuron. Jennifer Aniston is in everybody's brain. And as soon as I mentioned her, Jennifer Aniston, boop, lit up in your brain. And they've identified the specific neural sets. These are called brain signatures. We've all got them, right? But they've also found hypocrisy, love, and compassion, and all the virtues in our brains as well. In the same spot. Where Scott has compassion, I have compassion in my brain. And so if I think of something in a certain way, he thinks of something in a certain way, like I'm going to be compassionate with this hammer. The same sort of neural sets will light up. Isn't that amazing? We have very, very similar brains. That's fMRIs. What this has led me to understand or believe that our brains are an awful lot like computers that you can program. For example, a lot of people are hopeless. Does hope feel good? Yes. If you're hopeless, what does that mean? You just haven't practiced the neural set in your brain for hope. If I want to make this muscle bigger, what do I have to do? Work it out. Now it's bigger, right? So if you practice hope, you'll get better at it. And if you don't practice it, you won't be good at it. It's that simple. And it's the same thing in each of our brains. If you program your brain, it will respond that way. But just recently I was reading an article that described the brain also as an orchestra. It's not just about being a computer, it's an orchestra. How do orchestras work? Lots of different instruments, okay? Your brain has a lot of different stuff going on up there, and when it's working together, like a concert, in concert with each other, now we've got the whole brain working together. See, it's not enough to just work on, I understand what a hammer is. You also want to understand what compassion is. And the concept of being forgiving is a good idea, right? Well, forgiveness is in your brain. But what if you're forgiving and you're a coward? Well, you're not balanced. You got to still work on that. What's the antidote for being a coward? Courage, right? What if you're courageous but you're resentful? Right? That's great. You got courage, but you need to work on forgiveness, okay? An orchestra is when every instrument is playing well together in the brain or in the symphony or whatever. And everything sounds good. Well, our brains need all of those instruments playing well. It's an orchestra up there. And so you got to work on a whole variety of different things going on inside your brain. If I were to just lift weights on this arm and not this arm, wouldn't that look weird? After a while, I'd have a big muscle over here and a small one over here, and everybody would notice that. Well, he's out of balance. Balance that out, buddy, right? Well, we're like that with our moods and our emotions, too. Boy, he's really forgiving, but what a coward. He never goes out in public. Or, boy, she's really courageous, but man, she's really bitchy because she never forgives. I mean, you got to work on these things. We got to work on all of them, and all of us, since we have very similar brains, all of us have to do that. So, I'm going to pair a Buddhist concept and a biblical verse together. The first noble truth of Buddhism is what? Life is suffering. If you're here, you're going to suffer. Now, who does that apply to? 7 billion. If you're here, you're going to suffer. First noble truth of Buddhism. Psalm 19:7, the laws of the Lord are perfect, it will restore your soul. The laws of the Lord are perfect. That means there's no mistakes here. The laws of the Lord are perfect. It will restore your soul. That means whatever's going on here is happening for a reason, okay? And there's something important going on here because your soul's going to be restored. And we're going to talk about what that is in a minute. So what are some of the laws of the Lord? Recently, I keep emphasizing I want everybody to understand that Niels Bohr and Buddha said the exact same thing from slightly different angles. Niels Bohr, extremely smart physicist 100 years ago, said that the world we regard as real is made up of things that we cannot regard as real. He, among many others, implies that the world's an illusion. It's not what we think it is. We think it's physical, but it's really not. It's an energy world. It's a world made up of light. This is really what E = mc squared is all about. Niels Bohr said the world isn't real. Buddha says the wise man recognizes that the world is an illusion. The wise man recognizes it's an illusion, and it doesn't act as if it's real, and he escapes suffering. So Buddha says, you're gonna suffer, but once you realize the world's an illusion, you will escape suffering? That seems like a pretty straight line path. What the heck does that mean? The world's an illusion. Well, I need to work on that. Things that are happening to us are actually happening for different reasons than we think. They're not happening for the physical reasons. They're happening for the spiritual reasons. The laws of the Lord are perfect. It will restore your soul. So you got Niels Bohr saying the world's not real, and Buddha says when you realize that, the suffering will cease. So what are some of the laws, and how do we weave that into suffering? Why is suffering good? Do not eat off the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat off that tree. Eat off the tree of life. Well, the tree of life is embracing everything and recognizing that we do go through crappy things. Everybody does. But if you embrace it, man, is it going to speed up your progress. That's the point, because you're not the physical being you think you are. You're a spiritual being. So I'm going to throw together two poets. Pink. You know who Pink is? Not Pink Floyd. You just dated yourself a little bit.
No, kidding.
Pink, how old is Pink now? She's 30-something. Is a contemporary singer, as opposed to Pink Floyd. And Rumi. Who's Rumi? Poet from 1,000 years ago. I heard the song Beautiful Trauma the other day from Pink. And these are some lyrics from Beautiful Trauma. Think about those words, beautiful trauma. Just that song title gives me chills, Beautiful Trauma. In her lyrics, it says, everyone's chasing that holy feeling, and if we don't stay lit, we'll blow out. Pretty good, right? Now, it's one of these drawings I have, part of this drawing I have here. We all have a light in our hearts, okay? We all have a light. It's called Christ or Buddha, whatever you want to call it. It's a light, and it's in your energy heart. It's your soul center, if you will. We've all got it. We're all suffering, and we've all got that light, right? If we don't stay lit, it blows out. That's really what the suffering's about, because we're disconnected from that light. And that's what leads to the suffering, and it gets greater and greater and greater until you realize, man, I got to do something to light that pilot light again, right? Because all of us have it, and it's in our heart. Everyone's chasing that holy feeling. Now, Pink's really talking about romantic love in this song, but you know, when you listen to lyrics right, and you listen to your life right, and you look at your life right, everything that's happening to you is God trying to wake you up. And so you're chasing that holy feeling whether you know it or not. You are trying to find that light inside your heart as well. And if you don't stay lit, it's going to blow out. And that feels like suffering. The good news is it doesn't actually blow out. Just like your pilot light at home, just got to add a little fire again. It'll come back, the pilot light. It just feels like it, and that's really what the suffering is. And now here's Rumi, 1,000 years ago. And everything that he writes is exceptional. Everything is a beautiful poem, right? He writes this. This is a conversation between really us and God. I said, what about my eyes? And he said, keep them on the road. I said, what about my passion? And he said, keep it burning. I said, what about my heart? And he said, tell me what you hold inside it. I said, pain and sorrow. And he said, stay with it. The wound is the place where the light enters. All right, let's go through that. What about my eyes? What am I supposed to stay focused on? Stay focused on the road. See, this is Tao. The pathway goes through each one of us. Every one of us is growing this Christ light. All of us. Keep your eyes focused on that. That's the road. He doesn't mean 79, right? It's the same path for all of us. Buddha teaches the same thing. We all have our pathway back to the divine. Keep your eye focused on that. When you stay focused, guess what? The brain, the computer that it is, starts to program things, or when you program it, you stay focused, it becomes easier to do because you practiced it. This is Hebb's law. When you practice something a lot, you get good at it. Stay focused. This is a spiritual world, not a physical one. How many times do you wake up and do you see it as a physical world? Like pretty much every day of your life, almost all the time. It's a spiritual world. Niels Bohr and Buddha both say the same thing. It's not real. Stay focused on that. Oh, you have the appearance of reality. It feels like it's real, but it's really unreality, right? We have to stay focused on that. Keep your eyes on the road. I said, what about my passion? He said, keep it burning. That's pink, right? She said the same thing. If we don't stay lit, we'll blow out. Keep your passion burning. Now again, we all have one passion in common. The pursuit of this holy feeling, whether we know it or not. There's a lot of physical world stuff to do, but we gotta keep working on that Christ light. Where are we all gonna be in 100 years? Not here, right? We all have to keep working on that. Keep that passion burning. Well, sure, you might as well keep your passion for your physical world pursuits burning as well. But make sure, as Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of heaven, all the rest will be added to you. Keep that passion burning. What about my heart? He said, what do you hold inside of it? Pain and sorrow. Does he, God, Rumi in this case, say back, oh, that's horrible. Let me give you a hug. Pain and sorrow, that's bad. No. He says, stay with it. Right? Stay with it. Because the wound is where the light enters. What does stay with it mean? I know what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean resist. It doesn't mean this sucks. It doesn't mean I wish that didn't happen. It doesn't mean that. It means it happened to give you an opportunity.
Don't forget about it. And embrace it.
Embrace it, exactly. Yep. 100 years ago, Carl Jung said, what you resist persists. What you accept transforms you. It's exactly that. Embrace the negative circumstances, because the wound is where the light enters. It gives you that wonderful opportunity to hasten this process. It's why I drew this brain diagram and the body diagram here. Because when your brain works on things like love and compassion and forgiveness and patience and hope and wisdom and those things, guess what enters the heart?
Those things.
Yes. And then we start to get an expansion of this little light. Right? All because the brain then starts feeding, the mind in this case, feeds this energy into this heart. Starts to feel better. And if you practice it a lot, you get better at it. Right? Pain and sorrow, stay with it. It's teaching you something. Now, it doesn't mean you stay there forever. But when you resist it, you say, gee, I don't like this. I wish it didn't happen. The moment you do that, you're perpetuating it. It's just going to make it worse until you eventually submit and say, oh, I get it. Something else is going on here. Now, the process, like we talked about last week, the process is one of suffering. Kabbalah teaches the expansion of the vessel. I think of it as a higher bar. The more spiritual you become, just like the high jump in high school, the more spiritual you become, the bar gets raised on you. It only seems like it's harder. For goodness sakes, what did Jesus have to do to clear his bar? Right? But it's not bad, but as soon as you clear this bar, you get to this spot, bam, you're banging your head on the bar again. You're like, I'm suffering again. Then you clear that bar, guess what? It gets raised on you again. That's because you are going to keep going. The laws of the Lord are perfect. It will restore your soul. You are going to keep going until this is all lit up. Every single religion talks about perfection. Let me tell you something that some Muslims talk about. When Muhammad was having his revelations, when he started his revelations, he described it as an awful experience. He said he felt like his heart was getting torn out of his chest and his limbs were being ripped off his body. And it was a horrible experience. Now, there's a Muslim teacher by the name of Ibn Khaldun in a work called the Muqaddimah. Anybody ever read it? In this book, he's sort of the Muslim version of C.S. Lewis. He's a Muslim philosopher. He says this: the reason that we suffer is that revelation means leaving one's humanity in order to attain angelic perceptions and to hear the speech of your soul. This causes pain, since it means that essence leaves its own essence and exchanges its own stage for the ultimate stage of the angels. It's a painful process. Both Jesus and Apostle Paul compared the process to childbirth, which is very painful, okay? Suffering is part of it. In order to give birth to the angels inside you, to get back to that place of understanding who and what you are, it requires suffering. It requires pain. That's why it's not bad. How many times in the Bible does it say it? It's all over. James 1, 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds. Yay, suffering, right? Pure joy. Shut up, James. That's what I feel like saying. Pure joy. Pure joy this. Well, why is he saying that? Because he also gets it. Remember, wisdom is learning from other people, okay? Well, okay, what's that about? Well, if I'm asleep and I think the world's physical and I need to get awakened, guess what? It's got to happen to me.
Severe beating.
Poke, poke, poke. Yeah, severe beatings. You got to wake up. Stuff's going to happen to you so that you wake up to the true nature of reality and that you work on that. That's the point. Rattles the cages a little bit. And it doesn't mean you're bad at all in any way. Was Jesus bad for getting crucified on a cross? Heck no. Not bad. If you go through adversity, it does not mean you're bad. The whole thing is a loving, graceful universe that's actually trying to wake you up. As long as you embrace it, then you did your job. Pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let this perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete and not lacking anything. See, that's this. You don't get to just be forgiving and be a coward. You don't just get to be courageous and be resentful. Maturity is having all of it. It's an orchestra, all of the virtues, not just some of them, not just the ones your family taught you, all the virtues. That's the balanced brain. That's the one that pumps nothing but light into the heart. That's why in Matthew 5:48, Jesus says, be perfect, right? Pick a virtue, master it, all of them, right? Don't just, oh, that one's easy for me. I won't do the hard one. This includes loving your enemy, and it includes rejoicing in your suffering. Try it any other way and see how it works. All it does is breed darkness, so it doesn't work. Romans 5:3, we rejoice in our sufferings because suffering produces perseverance, which produces character, which produces hope. It's all of this, right? Suffering forces you to look for the light. Forces you. Kabbalah teaches there's the path of pain, path of light. You can do this without suffering. Don't wait for more suffering. Just keep looking for the light. Work on hope. Work on perseverance. Work on forgiveness. Don't wait for any more suffering. But if you're going through it, embrace it, right? And say, part of the process helps me wake up. Rejoice in it. In 1 Peter 1, 6 and 7, in all this greatly rejoice. Though now for just a little while you've had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. Okay, for just a little while. This is temporary. We know our suffering is temporary. Whatever your pains and sufferings are, it's gonna be gone when you die. As Rumi says, this place is just a dream. Only those who are asleep think it's real. Death comes in the dawn and you awaken laughing at your grief, right? This is not the end place. There's a lot more going on. Our job is to wake up while we're here. What does the word Buddha mean? Buddha means wake up. Wake up to what? This ain't your home and you're not a physical being. You're a spiritual being having a physical experience. That's this drawing. If you can tell what this is, I'll be impressed. That is you. That's your soul. It's sleeping in bed. That's a pillow. And when I drew it, I'm like, souls and pillows, they're both soft and comfortable. And so there's your soul, and your soul is having a dream. I put it down beneath the bed because that's a better way of thinking of it than above, okay? Because the fact is we are fourth or higher fifth dimensional beings having a lower dimensional physical experience. And in this process, you have a body, okay? Now, down here, we're walking around as people. That's a bird, that's money, whatever, stuff. It's a dream. What does Bohr say? This place ain't real. What does Buddha say? When you show up in this place, you're going to suffer. But once you realize it's a dream, you won't suffer. That's pretty cool. Also a straight line process to get away from suffering. Your suffering is happening to the body that is not you. Your suffering is happening to the body that is not you. You are a soul sleeping in a bed somewhere in some other dimension. Okay, not literally. Just visualize it that way. Your soul is asleep. What does Buddha mean? Wake up, right? What did Jesus say? I came to separate you from all this physical world stuff. I'm not from this world. I'm from the next world. He knew that this was happening too. So he leaves the dream and then he comes back. There's the crucifixion of the human ego and of the physical world obsession. And so our job is to recognize that you are perfectly, comfortably safe at home right now, wherever you are, comfortably with God, if that works for you. And nothing can ever happen to you. It's why you can fear no evil. Oh, bad stuff happens to bodies all the time, but it's like bad stuff happening to characters in a video game or in a movie. Now again, try it any other way and see how it works. Go ahead and complain. See if that works. It won't. Or just recognize, like Buddha says, once you recognize that the world is an illusion, you can escape suffering, because now, man, we just drastically changed this dynamic. Now I'm here aware that I'm in a dream. This does not by any stretch of the imagination mean I'm going to no longer participate. Oh, I can just go live in a cave now. No, to the exact opposite. The more I do this, the more I want to get engaged down here. The more compassion I have for people and their suffering, the more I want people to see the truth, right? More of it, not less. And it's not like, oh, to heck with this world. That's not that it at all. This world has become way more meaningful to me. I just know what it is. It's a temporary experience. It's a dreamlike experience. And all I have to do is realize that that's me. So what's the purpose of suffering? All of this stuff is oriented towards beautiful trauma. Whatever you go through, if you embrace it, the more the trauma, the more the light. It's real simple. Little baby traumas don't get you anywhere. They keep you firmly in the dream. Why would you need to wake up if nothing bad ever happened to you? I think of it as the night or the night before a wedding. The wedding party celebrates a little too much, right? And everybody's still asleep at noon the next day. And you're in the wedding party and you wake up and you see everybody else, the groomsmen and the bridesmaids and everything, they're still asleep. Are you going to just go, hey guys, the wedding is in a half hour, wake up? Or are you going to scream at them and poke them and turn on the music and dump a cold bucket of ice on their head? Yeah, you're going to do whatever you can to wake them up. That's why we suffer, okay? Suffering is waking you up. And if you embrace it that way, whoosh, it wakes you up. If you resist it, stay asleep for a while. See how well that works. And you just have more suffering. And then the more the suffering happens, the more the intensity, the more likely you're going to wake. But then if you resist that, more suffering. But the moment you say, I get it, somewhere in one of those wonderful texts that I don't know where, Jesus says something like this. Once you understand the purpose of suffering, you can no longer suffer. The moment you get it, it changes everything. Now you're like, it's not so much suffering anymore. Oh, it's pain, and I don't like it. But I embrace it as part of the process. I now understand it, like a woman giving birth. Really painful, but they understand why they're doing it. Endure your pain like that. Embrace it. Roll with it, right? Stay with it, like Rumi says. Think of it as beautiful trauma, like Pink, the prophet, says, right? Roll with it. Now the brain will change. Now it'll feed the light straight into the heart. Now the Christ continues to grow, or it continues to be revealed inside of you. And that's the last line here in 1 Peter 6 and 7. These things happen to prove the genuineness of your faith, so that it may result in praise, glory, and honor when Christ Jesus is revealed. Right? These things happen. Whatever's happening to you when you're suffering is happening to you so that that can ultimately happen. That's the point. Like a diamond that gets created by the pressure of the coal. Hopefully I said that right. Right? How do you crack open a coconut? You better hit it really hard with a hammer. How do you break into this dream and tell people that are sleeping souls that they're dreaming? How do you do that? Hit them with a hammer, right? The world will do that to you plenty of times a day, won't it? We call that suffering. All of the prophets and all the spiritual teachings are telling you to rejoice in that. That's why you're experiencing it. It's a light experience. It's actually turning on the light. Embrace it and run with it. You reduce suffering over time because you've learned your lesson.